Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Monday, September 22nd, 2025, and Trump calls for justice. One way or the other, we've got to charge them. We've got to move forward. We've got to do something. We can't just sit around and let all of this time and opportunity slip through our fingers. And he's making an impassioned plea for Pam Bondi to do something, anything, arrest them, for crying out loud. So we'll see what happens. He named, I think, Comey, McCabe, Struck, Page, all of these people, and I find it interesting. We'll see what happens, right? And again, I go back to my conundrum of: is this Trump? Is it the fault of Trump and the people he put around him? Is it Pam Bondi's fault? Is it Kash Patel's fault? Whose fault is this? Is it Bill Barr's fault? Whose fault is this that nothing ever gets done, even though the president seems to publicly say, let's get this done? Is he saying the same thing privately, is my first question. And my second question is, how can the president order these things and then they don't get done? Why is that happening? And why is he continuing to let that happen? So it's interesting. It's interesting, and we'll see how it all plays out. Gun confiscation failing in Ontario. There's the public safety minister talking about how the OPP are not participating in this. I don't know if other police forces across Ontario are participating in this. The minister implies that they are, but we'll see how it all plays out. I have no idea. Apparently, there's going to be news on the gun confiscation stuff happening tomorrow. Palestinian statehood, we're going to start there because, well, it's a quagmire that we've gotten ourselves into. We only have Mark Carney to blame. And also, there wasn't a vote in Parliament. There wasn't a debate in Parliament. There was nobody. The last vote in Parliament said, no, we shouldn't do this. So Carney's unilaterally acting on his own, being ridiculous. And he's ridiculous and stupid. So there you go. Debanked for raising the colors. If you raise the flag of England in England, how dare you, you terrorist, you. And they will come for you and they will give you fines and debank you. Actually, they won't come for you. They'll just turn off your bank. And I don't know how long that'll last, but that's gonna escalate quickly, right? Like that's gonna escalate very, very fast. I think, in fact, when they make announcements like that, we're gonna debank you for X, Y, Z. Like we're gonna give you fines for walking into the woods. There are people out there who are gonna do exactly what they say not to do in order to get them to do this thing and challenge it in the courts and things like that. And so it'll be interesting to see how many people, because if you get a lot of people who are getting debanked, people lose confidence in the banks, and then people stop putting their money in the banks, and bank runs are bad. Governments almost caused a bank run in Canada when they started debanking people. So we'll see how that all plays out as well, because I feel like it could go very badly, especially if you're using access to the banks to prevent patriots from raising their own country's flag. Freeland and her expensive Davos trip. There's a whole bunch of stuff to get to, so let's get to it first. We've got to get to Palestinian statehood and Mark Carney's idiocy, right? And Mark Carney says today Canada recognizes the state of Palestine, and he says Canada recognizes the state of Palestine and offers our partnership in building the promise of a peaceful future for both the state of Palestine and the state of Israel. We don't have any say. We don't have any say at all. We don't have a military to back it up. We don't have any say whatsoever in what happens with Israel or what happens with Palestine. All this does is piss off our trading partners, except for England and France and Australia, who are doing this too. And England and France and Australia are trying to pressure Israel to do something. But again, you can't make other countries do something unless you take away their money or go to war with them and have an occupying force to make sure they do what you say. If you don't have the occupying force, you go to war with them, you leave, and they'll go back to doing what they were doing before. You stay and have an occupying force for a couple of generations. Maybe they'll do what you said. Maybe. And then even then, right? That just breeds resentment, really. So we don't have a say. And Mr. Carney's trying to sell Canadians this false idea that we get a say in what happens next in Palestine. He's saying, oh yeah, well, Hamas won't have anything to do with leadership in Palestine. Really? Is that by your decree? Who's gonna support that, or who's going to police that on the other side, Mr. Carney? Nobody, you moron. Rick says, and Rick is a CPC MP, or former member of Parliament, no longer. He says, there is no state. Recognition requires set borders, elections, a government structure. None of these exist. You are rewarding terrorists. Why would you govern by executive order? So he is governing by executive order by not abiding or even bringing this to the House of Commons. Stephen Taylor says, about as relevant as Israel recognizing the state of Quebec, it was done in lockstep. This was done in lockstep with other countries. England, Australia, and Canada all recognized the state of Palestine yesterday. And it isn't relevant other than everybody's doing it. And again, I think it's trying to outmaneuver Donald Trump. I think this has something to do with outmaneuvering Donald Trump. And I don't know exactly what yet, but it has something to do with derailing his peace ability, his ability to make peace, derailing his ability to stop Israel, Iran, or anything else. I think the whole goal here is to undermine Trump, but I'm not exactly sure how the two things connect yet. I'll keep an eye on it. Here's Ryan. He says, on August 1st of 25, Carney told Canadians the only way his government would recognize Palestine as a state is if Hamas released all of the hostages, disarmed, and they must not play any role in the future governance of Palestine. None of these requirements have been met, and today Carney just announced his recognition of Palestine as a state. He lied once again. He lies every day. Every single day he lies. Pierre Poilievre says Prime Minister Carney is recognizing the Hamas state in another effort to distract from his record of rampant crime, costs, debt, immigration, and job loss. As he distracts abroad, conservatives are working at home. Our priority is to put Canada first, with direct flights to Armistead, right? Yeah. Restoring stronger take-home pay, safe streets. But it's the same stump speech as before. Secure borders within a self-reliant country. We're not a self-reliant country. Hardly. We have like 90% of our trade goes through the United States, who we're currently poking in the eye with this. Prime Minister Mark Carney, back to this. Priority is creating a Hamas state that will reward terrorists for raping civilians, taking hostages, oppressing Palestinians, and launching a war. Conservatives will always stand for Israel's right to exist and defend itself, living next to a future demilitarized, terror-free, democratic, and peaceful Palestinian state. Conservatives will focus on what is good for Canada because it's time to put our country first for a change. After waxing poetic about peaceful Palestinian state along with Israel and their right to exist and blah, blah, blah. Canada first. Canada. We just spent 10 minutes talking about Israel, you crazy. What are you talking about, Canada first? And I find it interesting how the liberal leader, the conservative leader have all of this influence to make Israel a safe place and Palestine a safe place. Have you been to like Brantford or Brampton or Toronto, right? Like we have illegal guns that are just rampant, and people are more worried about hate speech here than anything else. And the conservative leader, the leader of the opposition, is worried about Israel and Palestine. This is a very easy way to make very strong statements to look like you're fighting it out with the other side and have nothing to do with Canada whatsoever. And the other part is, I can't help but notice he's talking about, peace for Palestine, peace for Israel, all this stuff. They can live side by side in peace. We have like weekly, daily, pro-Palestinian protests that are disrupting daily life in Canada. Haven't seen him talk about that. We've got people from the Middle East praying in the middle of the streets, disrupting daily life in Canada. Haven't seen him saying anything about that. We've got a civil war brewing. We've got people who are trying to hijack free speech in Canada, and he doesn't talk about that much either. So he's talking about Israel, though. He's real focused on Israel because it's politically easy to sound strong and have absolutely no expectation of an outcome. Oh, man, well, I guess that foreign country that I don't run did something that I don't agree with. Uh-oh. And nobody's going to hold him accountable for that. If he spoke strongly about Canadian politics, he might get held accountable for that. Sean says 2 things not mentioned in the Liberal election platform: recognizing the state of Palestine and asking the Supreme Court to nullify part of the Constitution. The Carney government has now done both in less than a week. Sure has. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that super great? They just lie, and they continue to lie. Here's Keir Starmer recognizing a Palestinian state, and he says today, to revive the hope of peace for the Palestinians and Israelis, forget the British people who are fighting a war in their own country, trying to reassert their dominance in their own country and being called terrorists for it. We've got to find hope for peace. We've got to revive the hope for peace for Israel and Palestine. Why do these people get away with working for foreign governments? They don't work for foreign governments. Well, they shouldn't work for foreign governments. They should work for their constituents. But instead, they're working for Israel and Palestine. Isn't that weird, right? Here's Donald Trump. He says, I've got a message for Canada, United Kingdom, France, and Australia, who are recognizing a Palestinian state. You're rewarding terrorists. Here we go. I just think it's interesting because I don't think Canada actually recognizes a Palestinian state. I think probably if you walked around on a university campus, that people would be happy about it. But I think most people, in Canada, most people wouldn't care. Most people don't care. You could say like, they're trying to take away your speech rights. What do you think about that? And they'd be like, screw Charlie Kirk. And you'd be like, okay, all right. See you later, lunatic. It's a nightmare out there now, honestly. Here is Donald Trump.
Is there any use at all in pressuring Israel now to come to some sort of longer-term solution?
Well, you could make the case that you're rewarding people, that, you're rewarding Hamas if you do that. And I don't think they should be rewarded. So I'm not in that camp, to be honest. We'll let you know where we are in, but I am not in that camp.
Mr. President,
because if you do that, you really are rewarding Hamas, and I'm not about to do that.
Is there any use at all?
So we'll see how Trump responds to three countries that are supposed to be close ties to the United States, recognizing Palestine as a state. He says, I'm not in that camp. That's not me. Scott Carpenter says, Carney's daring the Americans to destroy Canada. Toronto Sun says Carney announces Canada will recognize a Palestinian state, and that's not going to go well for the renegotiation of the USMCA and other renegotiations we may have on the horizon. But the main one, with 90% of our products in Canada being shipped via tariff-free via the USMCA, that one's a big one. And I feel like Carney's doing his best to scuttle it. And to then, if that's scuttled, then everybody works for the government, right? Oh, well, you've got to go get a job at the steel mill, the government steel mill. It's the only job in town that'll be able to, maintain your debts, your ability to pay your debts, right? So there you go. You better go get a steel mill job, or you better go work for the government doing this or that. And then they'll have full control, right? Like then you're a they, them, right? You might as well dye your hair purple. This guy is the Minister of Security. Hold on. I'll tell you his official title. I can't read it because it's not translated here, but I can translate it in the bio. He's the Minister of National Security for Israel, Chairman of Jewish Power. The Chairman of Jewish Power. How come we don't have a Chairman of Canadian Power? I feel like we should have that. We should have a Chairman of Canadian Power, and it'll be this chair right here. I'll be the chairman. He's married to whatever, and he has 6 sweet children. 6 kids. 6 kids. Huh. Most leaders in the West don't have any kids, Danielle Smith, right? Weird. Macron doesn't have any kids. Does Keir Starmer have kids? I don't think so. Does Carney have kids? Carney's got kids, but one of them's trans. How many other kids does he have? Anyway, this guy, the National Security Chair of Jewish Power, says the recognition by Britain, Canada, and of a Palestinian state as a reward for the murders on October 7th demands immediate countermeasures, the immediate application of sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, and the complete crushing of the Palestinian Terror Authority. It's my intention to submit a proposal for the application of sovereignty in the upcoming government meeting. So I just wanted to show you that because the recognition of the Palestinian state is leading to things that are moving for Israel. Israel's pushing off of that, using that as a wall to push off, like you're in a swimming competition, and using that as a thing to propel them into this next phase. Okay. And so I find that interesting. And again, I say this ties to undermining Trump somehow, but I don't know how yet. But these two things are not isolated. Israel, I'm sure, asked Carney and Starmer and Albanese to do this for some reason. And I think the some reason is to undermine Trump. And I think that we're going to have to play it out a little while to see exactly how. But I think there's going to be some kind of thing where they're going to say, oh, see, we have to go to war. And then Trump is going to be made to agree because everybody else is agreeing or something like that. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to play out, but I'm sure of it. I'm sure there's some kind of play here, and we're watching it and being manipulated, thinking that we're watching a face-off between the United States and Canada and other leaders, when really this is more of a pivot of the world and people's understanding and how we understand things, how things are sold to us, right? And I think it's meant to undermine the United States as a world power and hand over world power, the microphone, to like this coalition of 3, the Starmer, Carney, Albanese, or I don't know what. But it's not going to be helpful in the short term for Canada and our trade renegotiation of the USMCA. Here, this guy's asking, what do you think this means for relationship with Israel and Canada, trade relationship, or more broadly relationship, and with I don't know that they get into the United States, but he says it's going to be more difficult because of doing this. And again, I feel like we're all being a little played. But here's Moukler talking about this.
Difficult. And these are things that stay on the record for a long time.
Yeah.
Canada's always been seen as fair-minded, as being able to look at very complex situations like this one and be positive, constructive, come up with solutions. This is strong, but it's also a bit facile. It's easier said than done. Concretely, how does this play out in the current situation? So there's a line in there where the Canadian government is affirming that Hamas will play no role in a future Palestinian government. Really? We get to decide that? And the war that's going on right now, and especially the part about the famine, is unforgivable for what's happening to civilians. We can all agree on that. But at the same time, Hamas has the avowed intention of destroying the state of Israel, and was getting pretty darn good at equipping itself to at least inflict serious harm, if not that end goal. So what are Israel's options faced with that? I know that the Netanyahu government can be very off-putting, and that's easy to understand. But at the same time, I think the Canadian foreign policy has always been a step above. Now, the fact that we're doing it in lockstep with Great Britain and Australia, and we're being...
It's so weird that he stumbled over that word, right? In lockstep. Ooh, should I say that? Is that too far? Weird. It made me look up. Because as I'm working here, as I'm watching the videos, I'm making notes and all this sorts of stuff. And as he said that, I was like... You're as uncomfortable saying that as I am hearing it.
Policy has always been a step above. Now, the fact that we're doing it in lockstep with Great Britain and Australia, and we're being told early in the week with France, means that long-standing allies of Israel are coming together and working together to push a strong message. And I think it's a message targeting an individual less than the state of Israel, because I can't imagine any way that Canada, France, Australia, Great Britain
would have the clout to push Israel? Yeah. Because Israel's usually in charge of the United States. Again, I feel like this is a play. Brian says Palestinian terrorists, Hamas, offer its thanks to Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia for the recognition of the state of Palestine, calling it an important step and comes as a result of struggle, steadfastness, and sacrifice. In other words, the terror attack of October 7th. So one of the things that I've talked about before, Bibi Netanyahu's on tape, and I've seen the tape, talking about how they fund Hamas through Qatar. Again, I feel like if you own both sides if you own both players, the dark and the light, right? Like if you've got a chess match and you own the guy who's playing the whites, but also own the guy who's playing the blacks, you can't lose, right? And so like in this situation, they can't lose. And I feel like we're having the wool pulled over our eyes because we don't know all the players and we don't know who owns all the players. Nobody's like NASCAR. Nobody's got like, I belong to Bibi, right? Like they don't have that. We can kind of figure out who's who, but then you get accused of being a conspiracy theorist, right? So it's pretty interesting. Here's Leslyn Lewis. Tamara Litch is highlighting this. She says, Leslyn Lewis says, last year, Canada's parliament voted 204 to 118 on a motion that explicitly stopped short of recognizing a Palestinian state. Yet the Carney Liberals ignored that democratic decision and unilaterally did it anyway. It's alarming to see this troubling Liberal pattern of circumventing the will of the Parliament to play to international audiences, while the Prime Minister acts like a czar when Parliament isn't even in session. So pretty wild stuff happening there. And Tamara Litch is responding to this. What do you call a leader of a country who implements his own policy with no debate in the House of Commons, no parliamentary oversight, and no consultation with the citizens? A dictator, a tyrant, right? Emily is responding to Dr. Lewis's breakdown of what's going on and the recognition of a Palestinian state over top of the will of the parliament. And she says Prime Minister Carney is running right over a democratic vote amongst our elected officials. Is Canada no longer a democracy? Welcome to the party, pal. It hasn't been a democracy in a while. The democratic part of our democracy doesn't work. Elon, E-Y-L-O-N, says, people are going to get killed because Starmer, Carney, and Albanese are telling Hamas terrorism works. It could be me, could be my friends, could be family. This empowers Hamas and emboldens it. I think that that's probably true, and it's a bad idea. Ryan says all of these countries are experiencing the same managed decline, and all of them pretty much at the same time decided to recognize Palestine as a state. These are puppets, all following the same path and orders. We are not sovereign nations. Okay, one of the things, and I'm going to briefly kind of talk about this, and then we'll come back to the tabs on the story on my usual daily stories. But there are three levels that are in play. Okay, and the citizens, people who are not in elected positions, that's the bottom tier level, okay? And our bottom tier level usually plays a game to replace the second tier level. So we play a game called democracy, and that democracy purports to impact the second tier. That's all it impacts. We replace people in the second tier with people from the first tier, and that's how the interplay is done. Now, there's a third tier in play above the leadership class, and these are the puppet masters. So the leadership class is actually just puppets. Our game only impacts the second level, okay? We can only impact the second level. And we can only impact the second level with the permission of the third level. And it's invisible. If you don't know it exists, then it doesn't functionally exist. But if you're trying to get into that second level, suddenly that third level becomes visible, because you need their permission. And so they give you permission, and now you're a tool of the puppet master. You're the puppet. And so our game only impacts the leadership class or the puppet class. The globalist, the third tier class, their game is independent from the second tier and the first tier, because the second tier, the leadership class, their job is to take our complaints, the first tier's complaints, and not bother the third tier with it. Basically, you do what the third tier says in the second tier, and whatever the citizens say, I don't care. You just do what you're told, and I don't care how you do it, just do it. That's it. That's the only job you have. And if you can't do it, somebody else is going to do it for you. And I don't care how you do it. I don't care how corrupt you are. I don't care how many kickbacks you're taking. I don't care anything. You just get done what I tell you to get done. And I don't want to hear from the citizens at all. And also, like, kill half of them, kill 50% of them. Just go. That's your job, right? And so our game, when we start having protests, when we realize that, like, things are not going, these people don't work for us, we should probably protest because we want people who work for us, right? Not realizing that our game never impacts the real controller's game. What I'm trying to say, and I think maybe clumsily, but what I'm trying to say is, as we continue to attack the second level, we continue to propagate the system that upholds the three-tier system. What we need to do is ignore the second level and attack the third level. And we need to figure out a way to attack the third level. Until we do, we will be doomed to repeat all of the mistakes we've made over the last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, because what we've been playing is a protracted game, a game that's cut in half, a game that is not the full game. And the people on the third tier watching our game, as long as we keep playing that game, they're very secure. We need to figure out, and the truckers scared the shit out of them, because the truckers actually moved into that third tier. They threatened that third tier in a way they hadn't been threatened before. And that's why we see all sorts of laws and stuff coming back. So it's the same in England, the same 3 levels. We only ever attack the middle level. We only ever attack the leadership class. And by attack, I mean, we look at the game, the agreed upon game of democracy. We attack using strategies that apply in that game of democracy. The leadership class utilizes the third level to cheat in that game, and we're not allowed to talk about that. Look at everything that's happened from 2020 to now. And our game cannot impact the third level game, or the second level has failed at their job. And if the second level fails at their job, then they get liquidated, Justin Trudeau, and the third level replaces them with somebody who will, quote, do better. This is the game, and we need to recognize what the game is so we can actually play effectively. Right now, and for the last 50 years, we've not been playing effectively, right? Charlie Kirk, maybe he threatened the third level of third tier. Maybe he did. We'll talk about that later. But fundamentally, what I'm trying to say is, as we continue to propagate the same game we've played for decades, we propagate our own continued imprisonment within that structure. And that structure is rotten to the core, and it doesn't benefit us. And we are handing our country over in a way that people will just argue about, and as they hand the country over. And we need to change in a hockey game, when you're like, your team's like getting demoralized and you need to change things, so you got to have a fight or something like that. You got to do something that's going to shake it up. We need to do that, but we need to actually do that like the truckers did, right? Like maybe Charlie Kirk did, like somebody who's attacking the third level and not the second level, somebody who understands the broader game in play and is able to play that game properly. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's me, so I'm just getting censored. Oh, well. But Ryan says all these countries are experiencing the same managed decline, and all of them pretty much at the same time, because decide to recognize Palestine as a state. These are puppets, and all following the same path and orders. We are not sovereign nations. I agree with that, and that's why I decided to talk about that then, because there's a structure to this, and we are failing to recognize it, and that failure to recognize it is imprisoning us, is kicking the can down the road for us to solve it. And in fact, if we refuse to look at these realities, we will never solve it. We will continue to just propagate the same cracked game. Here's Alistair. He says, the premature and unconditional recognition of a Palestinian state is one of the gravest errors in British foreign policy of the past 50 years. It is a shameful moment for this government and country. Yeah, sure is. And Melissa Lanceman says, in the short term, this reckless decision destroys Canada's credibility, shreds the international rules-based order, and abandons the Western values we once proudly defended. In the long term, the consequences are obvious. Hamas is rewarded, terror is legitimized, hostage-taking is vindicated, and the violent mobs who block streets, vandalize businesses, target synagogues, and even shoot up schools are handed a victory they don't deserve. Canada just recognized a Palestinian state whose current government pays the salaries to terrorists for killing people. That makes them a state sponsor of terror by Canada's own definition. Canada is weaker, smaller, and more isolated from our allies. Mark Carney's vacuous foreign policy based on pretend conditions is cold, calculated, and done entirely for votes. The Prime Minister has just written a check to terror and all its victims everywhere. Yep, pretty awful. Pretty awful, if you ask me. We're 25 minutes in. I've got to say goodbye to the stream. One last thing before we say goodbye to the stream. This is a left-wing CTV saying Angelina Jolie doesn't recognize her country anymore because